I'll make a
Oh,
so welcome everyone. We should be live. I'm here with Chris at Speaker's Corner. I think everyone knows him. I don't have to make too many introductions. He's been on the channel before. We had a brief discussion about this issue, and of course, the benefit is that Chris is actually in the trenches. Chris actually hears this from Muslim apologists, and he sees the difficulties in getting this message across. So yeah, Chris, I'll hand over to you. You can outline it and we can take the conversation from there. But thank you for coming on. Great to have you.
no worries, Lloyd. Thank you for having me. It's been a while, but I'm really glad to be back here. I love our little streams that we do together. I think they're really informative, and hopefully they help others learn well about the weak side of Islam and why Islam is false. So the
Right.
one particular thing I want to go through today is the Quran and the idea that Muslims have about the Quran, that it has in some sense been perfectly preserved. They have a doctrine which is
Imperfectly
very
preserved.
well, that's one way. I think it's imperfectly preserved, but they think it's perfectly preserved. They think there's nothing wrong with it. That the copy they have today goes all the way back to Muhammad. There is no additions in the text, no new letters, no changing of letters, no words, no dots, no vowels. Nothing has changed. Everything is as it should be, going all the way back to Muhammad. And I don't think that's true, Lloyd. I don't think you think that's true. And there are very good reasons to believe that that is a false doctrine. It is 100% false. There is a sense that Muslims could say that the Quran is preserved generally, but this is not the claim that Muslims tend to make.
Pickled or salted when you say preserved?
Yes, that's a very good point. It gets interesting because the way they view the Quran is so radically different from the way that we view our own scriptures. The
Right.
Quran is like so to be honest with you, I see it more like a transformer. The Quran isn't a thing; it's a collection of things that no one's not exactly sure what it is. But it's a collection of many different things, and they affirm that it is all of these things, and none of these things have changed. But they can't tell you for sure that this is the
Can I
case. But it's been
perhaps add
perfectly preserved.
something? I mean, it's a truism within Islam that the Quran is the literal speech of Allah. And since Muhammad died, rotted, stank, and got buried, they no longer
Yeah.
have his presence on earth. So, and they don't have a Jesus figure as we have in Christianity. So the Quran is a substitute Jesus figure. It's a substitute divine presence of Allah on earth for Muslims. It's the closest they can get to that. And of course, they
That's a good
cannot
point.
criticize Allah's divine speech. What do you think of that perspective?
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, and it ties in nicely with a claim that early heretical groups in Islam made. The name has skipped me; it'll come back to me in a minute. But there were early groups that basically said, "Hey, we can't say that the Quran or Allah's speech is uncreated and eternal, because if we say that and we believe we have Allah's speech in a real sense on earth, then in effect, Allah, in a weird way, has incarnated." But not as a person, and like not as a full flesh and blood as in Jesus Christ, but rather as a book or as a recitation. And they thought that
Mm-hmm.
this was crazy, and they actually made the claim that, look, you're sounding like Christians because you're taking the idea in effect of incarnation, that there's a real sense that Allah's word is Allah and also in creation. So yeah, it's kind of like they've deified the scripture to
And
replace the fact that
And
they
at
don't
the
have
end
Christ figure.
times, in the eschatology, the Quran does become a humanoid, human-like figure with the mouth and speaks.
Yeah.
That's
Which
within the
really, I
Hadith.
mean, that must be because if you say that the speech of Allah is Allah, and it's very hard for Muslims not to say this because again they're both uncreated and eternal, then they have to say, well, Allah then becomes a man or takes on the form of a man. And in which case, if Allah does that, then what's the real difference between that and the incarnation?
Right. And the claim is that, of course, the Quran is eternal because it is inscribed on tablets that exist with Allah. And yet that would contradict their theology that Allah is the only uncreated eternal thing, whereas the Quran is also eternal. So these are arguments that Muslims need to really answer, and that we don't press them hard enough in these things. And of course, they jump around and we let them. Would
Yeah,
you agree that's a
absolutely.
good argument? Is that something that
Oh, I think that's sound. I mean, we've brought this up a lot, and to be honest with you, they're getting pounded with this at the corner anyway, because they can't say that there's Allah. Let's do some counting, as they like to do. You've got Allah.
Mm-hmm.
You've got his eternal, uncreated word, and then you can go on to say his spirit, and you don't say
And
his
Jesus
word.
is his word and his spirit.
Exactly, and so you
Which
end
is
up with
separate from him then.
yeah. So you can count these, but the issue is that the Quran doesn't leave open the possibility of something being distinct but not separate. So they have a weird saying, which is like Allah's attributes are neither him nor other than him, which is technically not possible. But because
Sorry,
they have
my brain just started hurting at that.
yeah. Let's go through that. So Allah's attributes are neither him nor other than him. But of course, there can only be one of the two, right? Either his attributes are him, they're just descriptions of him, or there's something other than him that he refers to. But they don't have
Not
an
separate
understanding
from him. But...
Yeah, it's quite it's not philosophically well developed, and they can't develop it because the Salaf didn't develop it. So in essence, they're stuck in this kind of time warp of, if the Salaf, the early companions, if they said it, it's good enough for us. And it's like, yeah, but it's very dumb. So what do? You need to abandon it, right? But they can't, because that's bitter, that's innovation. So they kind of refuse to do that. So you end up with Muslims just holding this form of, well, you can't count them as separate things, but we can't explain to you why. Which, of course, is basically just an appeal to mystery. And that's basically what any Christian could do with the Trinity, for example.
But if Christians appeal to mystery, then we are faking it.
Exactly.
But if they do it, it's all good. And if we appeal to old documents like the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's all fake. But if they appeal to old documents like the 2 pages of the supposed Birmingham fragment, calling it a manuscript is a little ambitious, then that's an old Quran. It's 2 pages. Two pages.
So I love the Birmingham portfolio stuff because they're walking into a trap when they reference it. I think the best way to challenge this with a Muslim anyway who brings up the Birmingham portfolio is to give the standard dating, which is 568 to 645, and you basically say, okay, so there's like I think there's a very high probability it falls within this dating range. That's fair enough, but you can say, well, hang on a second, when did Muhammad become a prophet? So first of all, Muhammad is born in exactly right. So first of all, Muhammad is born in 570. So this already has a starting date of 2 years before that. So that's a little iffy, but it's okay. He's born in 570. The starting date is 568. But then he doesn't become a prophet until 610. So it definitely cannot have been revealed before then. Otherwise, that would prove Islam false. So now they have to be like, okay, well, we're going to have to argue for the later part of this. But it's like, hang on a second. It gets worse than that. Because we know exactly what surahs are contained within the Birmingham portfolio. It's parts of Surah 18, 19, and a few parts of Surah 20. So if you take that, we can then look at the standard Islamic narrative, because why not? Let's look at what they say and see when those surahs were revealed.
And they are
Medina. They are supposedly Meccan, but the point is that using their tradition, Muhammad, for example, for the first 3 years, so from 610 to 613, he only had the first 5 verses of the very first surah that was revealed.
Okay. Yes.
So, and then after that, he gets some stuff. But my point is that, again, that makes it worse. So it's not just 610. Practically speaking, it's more like 650 and onwards.
Right. So that does change the chronology. I could be wrong here. I mean, my aim wasn't to really discuss the Birmingham portfolio per se. I mean, although definitely to bring it up. But yeah, so this shows the chronology to be potentially false or in need of correction. And also the stories that it contains are both Christian myth and apocrypha. These are Gnostic myths. Now, is this merely Christian stories written in an Arabic style, right? Or Christian cultural sort of, and even heretical stories written in an Arabic style, or is it the Quran? And then also the style of the Birmingham folio or the Birmingham fragment is clearly 650 plus, even later. Yeah. Some say even up to a century later. So the style is clearly late. So is it really the argument? I mean, does the argument stand that this proves that it's an early Quran? And also it's deviant. It's not entirely Uthmanic.
Right. So yeah, you're correct. So Stephen Shoemaker makes a point that actually there are some serious issues with radiocarbon dating, particularly of this part of the world in this particular time period, and they give a lot of alarming results. And this we can talk about that in more detail. In a
Yeah,
bit
it could be dating biological material that came in later, like pollen or stuff, and that. So it could be.
Yeah. So his argument as well is that actually, if you look at the Hijazi script, if you look at the surah separators, they're written in nice like orange coloring and things.
Colored inks.
These are later developments. It would be very odd if the very first sort of manuscripts of these were using that already. These tend to be things that come much later. And I agree with that. I think the radiocarbon dating can't be trusted. I think it is later. I think it is in a very similar style to other manuscripts that we've seen that other scholars would say are later as well. So I think that alone is enough to say that.
Yeah,
the
I'm just
reason
bringing
why,
that up because
sure.
it has chapter separators, decorated verse endings, and colored inks, right? And these are from all after 650.
Yeah.
So
I remember just as well, if we take their, again, we're taking their argument seriously just in this context, you would have to say that there is an Uthmanic style Quran that predated the Uthmanic recension. Whoops. You've accidentally just said, you've just said that, oh yes, according to the standard Islamic narrative, Uthman, he had his recension somewhere between 650 and 656. By the way, here's an Uthmanic style Quran that's been dated between 568 and 645. So it came before that. And this is why you can find scholars who actually say, guys, stop saying that this dating is like final, because it actually represents quite a few challenging ideas to our beliefs.
Remember, there's several Saudi scholars, they went against the British dating and they stated this thing must be later. The Saudis themselves came out and denied the dating of the Brits, because this throws a major wrench into their Quran narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nightmare for them to pick up on the Birmingham portfolio and to use it in a debate, because it brings up so many questions and it calls in doubt the narrative that Islam gives. So I'm perfectly happy if Muslims use this, but they're going to be pointing out lots of holes in Islam. So that's fine from my perspective. But I do agree with Stephen Shoemaker that it's actually later. It's not from the time period I think it is.
Also, I've seen many apologists try to talk about when was the ink from? Have you dated the ink to try to claim that but we don't have to. We've got all the stylistic conventions in the document as well. There's all the colored, the fact that you have colored inks, the fact that you have decorated verse endings, the fact that you have all of these spelling conventions that are not early. So you can so they kind of want to ignore all of those other indicators and then just talk about, that means you have to cut up a part of the manuscript, and who's going to cut up a part of a major historical manuscript like that? That's not going to happen. So they try to use that as a gotcha to get out of jail free card.
They do. And they also, so when I put my argument forward that actually this is too early and it may even predate Muhammad given the revelation, they then all of a sudden adopt the argument of, only the parchment has been dated and therefore it could actually be much later, which is true. That is true. I don't agree much with it, because I do think, generally speaking, given the amount of effort you have to go through to produce that parchment, once it's produced, it's probably going to be used fairly quickly. So for me, that doesn't really seem to add up too much. But it reveals another problem. This manuscript that we have, the Birmingham portfolio, that is unlikely to be the original. It's likely to be a copy. But if it's likely not the original, because it's very rare that you just happen to have found the very first one in existence, then you actually have to trace this back even earlier. Because if this is just a copy, that would mean that there's an earlier one, and perhaps that was an earlier one of an earlier one, which puts the dating back even earlier if they go by the radiocarbon dating, which again is even more problematic. They end up, in effect, making an argument that it predates Muhammad.
I had not considered these questions. That is some brilliant information. Have you used this on the Muslims at the Corner, and have they got responses to this? And maybe we should also make this more public. We really should. I should make some talks about this and put some stuff out, because this is definitely amazing. And really, these are problems you're highlighting.
Yeah, they don't. They don't have any answers for this. Usually, they just change the subject at this point because they hope you don't know anything really about the Birmingham portfolio. They think you're ignorant, so they can just say, "Did you know in the what's it?" They say the Birmingham. There's a Birmingham like not university, like a Birmingham museum where they actually have this. Right? They actually have the actual manuscript. If you go there and you see it, you can find out for yourself. They will tell you it's from 568 to 645. But as soon as you bring in these kind of things, then they're like, oh, well, I haven't really thought about that. I haven't thought about when the surahs were actually revealed and how that fits in the timeline. Oh, I didn't really think about the fact that this predates Uthman. Oh, I also didn't really think this is unlikely to be the original. And then, of course, when they go through that, it becomes, difficult.
Right. So what made you decide to have this discussion based on the material that I put out? What was it that stood out to you that made you want to?
So actually, there's a lot in this that I think I've been looking into as well, and I absolutely love like this. This is just something I've been basically obsessed with for a while now. The stuff that covers the 1924 Cairo edition by the Al Azhar University in Egypt in Cairo, I think that's interesting to me. I think there's a lot more that I have to learn about that I want to study because there's a really good argument that can be put forth by that. And there's also another kind of argument I want to introduce you to. I'm still testing this one. I do wonder what you'll think about it.
Sure.
So maybe we can talk about that. But
please go ahead. You start. I mean, it's good to have you on. So because I'm learning something new as well, and we can both discuss. Each of us give our input on our different perspectives.
Yeah. So the 1924 Cairo edition of the Quran is in effect something that I don't think was ever intentional. It wasn't intended for this to be the standard Qira'at, the standard reading.
No, apparently they designed it for Egypt. They wanted it to solve problems in Egypt.
And so let's set the scene. So you are a lecturer at a university, right? And you're in Cairo, and you're teaching Quranic studies. And part of this involves you having to say things like, "Hey guys, I want you to turn to Surah Al-Tawbah, Surah 9, Ayah 29." And you go, "Okay." And all your students, they start going through maybe their own personal Qurans or some books that you hand out or whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden, when you ask people to recite it back to you, people recite different things. Now, that, as you can imagine, is kind of a big problem because it turns out there's no actual standardized verse numbering. And one of the reasons why is it turns out in the different qira'ah, in the different readings, some qira'ah, and when I say qira'ah, it's the Arabic word, it just means a reading of the Quran that is different. To me and you, it would mean a different Quran, but they will insist endlessly it's not a different Quran, but it is because it's a Quran reading that says different things in different places, and some of them contradict. But so you've got a student with one qira'ah, one Quran, student with another qira'ah, another Quran, and they have different verse numberings. So when you call out a verse, they actually don't recite the same thing. And the reason why is because some qira'ah have something called the Bismillah, which some qira'ah consider as being the very first verse of a surah, and some don't. So if you think about it, if someone brings a qira'ah with the Bismillah and someone brings the qira'ah without the Bismillah, you've now just changed the ordering by one. So if I say to you, go to Surah 9, Ayah 29, it might actually be Surah 9, Ayah 30 for another person.
Right.
And so now you've got this problem where it's like, oh, okay, everyone who's got this version, you're actually meant to ignore the Bismillah, it's this. Everyone who's got the one with it, then you do this. And you end up with difficulties, right? And it's a right pain. It would be great
if people here's the thing, if the Quran is recorded literally and perfectly, dot for dot, letter for letter, word for word from the beginning, and has never had any more than a single form, single text, why would the Egyptians have multiple different Qurans that multiple different students were drawing upon, which conflicted with each other?
That's a very good question. It's almost as if that's not the case. And from the earliest points in Islam, there was a multitude of different Qurans. The different imams were reciting in mosques during their prayers. And people knew about this, and they wanted to fix it. And the Uthmanic recension was an attempt at fixing it. And then there were other attempts later on, but they didn't work. And for that reason, they canonized, they accepted, so to speak, a set amount of Qurans and rejected others.
Right.
That's what I think.
Agreed. So that this is now they've got the same problem that happens now in Egypt, and the king of Egypt tells Al Azhar, "Hey, look, you guys need to do something," because this was from the king of Egypt. Now, some questions I have is why would it take 17 years for Al Azhar to finally verify and approve this version if they could just go to, I don't know, Johnny Nobody in the chat section on YouTube and say, hey, you've memorized the Quran. Could you just repeat it? We'll just write it down as you go, and Bob's your uncle. Problem solved. So, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that would make sense, right?
that's what they
Based on
should
the
do.
Muslim claims. Sorry?
Yeah, if there was one perfectly preserved Quran, it should be really simple. But it's almost as if there was some logistical problems with, first of all, getting all these different versions of the Quran that people are using, deciding on which one to use, because you only want to pick one, right? So which one are you going to use?
Right.
Yeah, and fleshing this out.
So it strikes me odd that I'd like Muslims to answer me why it would take 17 years to transcribe the Quran from a single guy, supposedly just reciting it from memory. And then also, why wouldn't they simply go to one of the old Qurans and just copy paste from one page to the next and go, oh, we're just going to use printing presses now instead of hand transcribing using calligraphers. But here we've got an old Quran complete. We're just going to copy over. Why do you think they didn't do that? And I'd love a Muslim to answer me on that.
Yeah, I'd love Muslims to answer that as well. I have yet to get an answer on these kind of questions because Muslims are just uninformed, unfortunately. We need
what
to
do they
have
do when you
Muslims
ask them this? I
aware.
mean, do you think what's their response when you do ask? Because all they've done lately to me is say, well, it was memorized, and they just kind of repeat that like a mantra.
Yes, that's very common. You'll get something like, you see in Islam, we have this thing called the oral tradition. And they'll do this, which is really annoying. Oh, you see, you're making the mistake of thinking the Quran is a book. The Quran is a recitation. That's what Quran means. And they say things like this, and I don't think they realize they're not really saying anything. Like, it doesn't really matter if it's a book or a recitation. The point is, a recitation ultimately becomes a book at some point in history, and supposedly already has. So
Right.
surely there's just one book. Like, it's just one Quran.
And also, if it's different pronunciations, then look, if you have the word tomato and the word tomato, they're spelled the same. It's the same word. The pronunciation doesn't affect the spelling. It doesn't change the grammar of the sentence. So therefore, the pronunciation claim also falls apart because we have different grammar.
Yes, you can show this quite easily using their traditions, because their own traditions tell them that's not true. There's a hadith we can bring up and stuff, but basically there are two people, Umar bin al-Khattab, I think, and Hisham, who are companions of Muhammad. They argued about what the Quran said because they were reciting it differently. But here's the thing: they're from the same place. They're from the tribe of Quraysh, so there wouldn't have been pronunciation difficulties. And there have been Islamic scholars that have pointed that out, and they said, "Look, guys, it's not just dialects. Like, we can't say that. That's not correct."
Right.
And just in case people aren't aware of this, the Quran supposedly, according to Muhammad, was revealed in 7 different ways, and they call them the aruf. And these 7 different ways, some people try and say it's just dialects, but we know that's not true because their traditions tell us it's not true. So these were actual changes.
It's actually great that you. Okay, let's bring up some definitions. I want to bring up this, if I may. So, yeah, on that point, I want to bring up some references. You know me and my facts. This is from a book called Rethinking Quranic Studies by William al-Sharif. And he says here, obviously, that it is the book of God. So therefore, it goes against the Islamic faith to question the Quran, which is already a bias, a severe bias, right? Then he goes on to say, and he writes this in his book, The Prophetic Discourse. Muslim scholars such as Al-Qasim ibn Salam, Dainuri, and Ibn Mujahid, right, mention different readings of Quranic verses, though they believe the Quran is literally fixed in a preserved tablet, Allah al-Mahfuz, in heaven. However, he notices it is noticeable that they accept or reject certain readings in accordance with their theological positions. Isn't that just convenient?
Yeah, very convenient.
So that means there are meaning differences.
One of the people you just quoted there, Ibn Mujahid, is an expert on Qira'at. He's like one of their best scholars. He's actually the guy that standardized the 7. Yeah.
Right. And also he says here, there's no authentic document to tell us why only 7 readings were permitted. Muslim scholars claim that 7 readings were permitted because of the 7 dialects of 7 major tribes. And there were different readings because of the nature of Arabic script. He says there were more than 7 tribes and dialects in Arabia. No one knows for sure why some dialects were accepted and others were rejected. There are not 7 systematic readings of the Quranic text, because he's got the Miatis, right? Ithaf Fudala al-Bashar, right? Whatever, it just keeps on going. Speaks of 14 readings.
Yep.
So, and I mean, I've shown people 19 different readings. So I'll actually just go up here again. I'll just go back to the beginning. Now here's the thing. These are not even readings. These are transmitters of the readings. There's a thing called the readings, the 7 official, as established by Ibn Mujahid. But then, and this is not even the complete story, because once you get the facts, the story changes again. But these are 19 separate transmitters with their own slightly different versions and variants. So we have readings, variants, and then we've got variants of the variants. Your thoughts here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so when Ibn Mujahid made the 7 readings, these guys weren't around, right? So there wasn't this idea of transmitters with Ibn Mujahid, or at least there wasn't a canonized understanding of it. That actually comes later. And one of the reasons it comes later is because, as you pointed out, there starts to be variance among the supposed transmitters. So you have like Nafi, or you have what's the other one? Hassan Asim. So you have these guys with their own readings, but then people start making different versions of those supposed readings. So now people are questioning, wait. I thought it said this and this one, and they're like, no. So what they do is they standardize it to 2. So now you have the 2 Rawiya, the 2 readings that are accepted. And if you think about it, it'll be like, well, hang on a second. Why do you need 2? Why not just 1? Well, it's because there were a lot and people were arguing about it, and they just compromised. As far as it seems to me, they compromised on
this one text
too.
Because the standard story is, and I'll look into Ibn Mujahid in a moment, but we have the 7, the 3, and the 4. So Ibn Mujahid canonizes these 7. Right? This is what Ibn Mujahid canonizes, these 7 here, in whenever he did, in the 8th century, right? Supposedly. Right? Damashqi, Al-Makki, Madani, Basra. And look at the different dates between these guys. 736, 785, 771, 745, 805. There's a fairly large spread. It's like an 80-year spread in this range, right? Wouldn't it be the same Quran dot for dot, letter for letter over this 80-year period? And then 3 more readers are added. And there's additional facts. So, I mean, so the story mutates, but we can add additional facts. And then, of course, you get 4 more readers are added later for 14. Why did we have to add more if we have 1 Quran?
It's almost as if the Quran was basically being understood in so many different ways that they had to canonize more and more as time went on, because the alternative is to just accept that tons of imams have basically just been getting the Quran wrong for like centuries. Right. Which is probably too embarrassing. So,
and then we have the 7, the 14, and the 9. So here's 7 readings from Ibn Mujahid, who died 936. Then in 1194 comes Al-Shatibi, and he makes 14. Don't ask me what the 14th one is. I have 13 here in the list. So he then has these transmitters, because apparently every reading has 2 transmitters. So in other words, the guy who wrote it, the senior cleric who wrote the version, the reader, had 2 disciples who were trusted, who transmitted it. And so therefore there are 2 transmitters for every reader. And then, of course, in 1429, which is, I mean, basically yesterday in comparison with when the Quran is supposed to be written, so Al-Jazari has another 9.
Yeah. So do you know about the whole Tawata thing, the Mutawata claim? Have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
So this is something you'll find in the Pak as well. Muslims will say, oh, okay, but the first 7, and I don't know where they get this from. They must have got it somewhere. The first 7 are Mutawata, meaning that all these different Qurans, these different Qira'at, they all go back to Muhammad, because at every single point in the chain, because they love their chains of narration, they are so mass transmitted that it's impossible to think that either it was fabricated or it's in error and it was a mistake. It's impossible to believe that, because they're so well transmitted. The issue is that they're not. And Marian Van Putten has brought this up, as well as others like Shady Nasser.
Here, I just brought this up here.
Yeah, with the exception of nobody considered the Qur'an until the 7th century. Yeah. Oh, so basically, the doctrine of mutawatir, because it's kind of a doctrine, it's like a later development, but basically,
if something has been transmitted through sufficient channels, although some will say 25, you have to have 25 transmitters, and then you have something that is mutawatir, which is undeniably true and must be believed by Muslims. Although certain verses, certain hadiths could be transmitted by one, but that one person is so reliable or so critical. But notice, Ibn al-Jazari, who canonized 9 more transmitters, rejected mutawatir.
Yep. Yeah, he absolutely did. In fact, Moran Van Putten on his blog has a great article where he actually translates Al-Jazari's work. And Al-Jazari was like, okay, so we need some criteria to determine what is a valid reading and what isn't. Again, that's not something you should do if something is mass transmitted and certain, right? You don't need criteria, because criteria implies that there are fake ones and there are true ones, and you're trying to figure out which is which you shouldn't need to do, right? If this is perfectly preserved.
Yeah.
So
just sorry for the interruption. I wasn't aware. Sergeant Grinch, the leukemia treatment has been tough, and I'm stronger. Thank you, Sergeant Grinch. We weren't aware that you had a medical condition, but yeah, we wish you well. Pray for you, and for the audience, please, if you can send your prayers and to Sergeant Grinch. He's been a great support of the channel and channels like mine. So yeah, please,
you, Sergeant Grinch.
Please keep me in your prayers.
Yeah, please go on. So Al-Jazari sets out this criteria. The criteria is interesting. It's 3 points. So he says the first one is that the Arabic grammar has to be correct. Okay. The second one is that it has to conform to one of the Uthmanic manuscripts. And it's interesting he phrases it that way, because the Uthmanic manuscripts, the codex supposedly he wrote, was not uniform. There were variants in it that he sent to different regions, which is, to be honest with you, like a minefield of how is that perfectly preserved. But okay, we'll go with that. And the third criteria is that there is a single Sahih chain that goes back. Not like so many it's mutawatir and therefore absolutely certain that this went back to Muhammad. And the reason why is because he said, look, guys, think about it. Like, use your brains. Just think about this. If we say they have to be mutawatir, then anyone that comes up with stuff, like anyone who comes to the reading with terrible Arabic grammar that's not from the Uthmanic Codex that we know about, but is supposedly so well known, then by our own criteria of what it means to have something mutawatir, we would have to accept it. We would be like, okay, it literally doesn't make sense. It's just a bunch of nonsense. It doesn't conform to the Uthmanic Codex, but it's mass transmitted. So by our own understanding of what it means to be mass transmitted, it means without doubt, we would have to say Muhammad actually said that. That's kind of problematic. And also, what do you do for all the existing Qira'at, the 7 from Ibn Mujahid, for example? They don't really have mass transmission. In fact, there are scholars who weren't even aware of some of the readings. For example, Al-Tabari wasn't aware of a particular reading in Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is Surah 112. He wasn't aware of it. How can a scholar who did this for a living and was writing a book on the Qira'at, how could he not be aware of some of the variants? Because if that's the case, then how is it mass transmitted? It's not mass transmitted because there are people who should have known about it that didn't know about it.
Yeah, wow. Also, Sidki wrote a paper that even amongst the canonical Qira'at, there are 292 known differences.
Wow. Yeah,
these are the ones they admit to, put it that way. Right? So, I mean, yeah. And also notice when they canonize these Qira'at, one from Mecca, one from Medina. Why would there be a difference between Mecca and Medina? And then he chose Basra, Damascus, and 3 from Iraq.
Yeah.
Now, why Iraq? Why not Mecca? Why not Medina?
Because all of their scholars of his religion, they basically went to Iraq. Like in terms of, if you look at everything, Iraq is like a powerhouse of Islam in the early period. It doesn't really go to Medina. Medina seems like an afterthought, if anything, and the Hijaz seems like an afterthought. And I want
So,
to,
are we looking at an Iraqi Quran or an Arabian
yeah,
Quran?
yeah. I think the Quran was in development for a long period of time, and I think there are evidences to prove that. I think that not all of it went back to Muhammad. Some may have gone back to someone, um, for reasons we can go into. But yeah, it looks like there's been some play here from that city.
Right.
I think, and by city I mean the Basra or Kufa in modern day Iraq.
Yeah. This is a paper from 2011, right, discussing Quran variation being normal. So this is orality, literacy, and the 7 ahruf hadith. The well-known hadith that the Quran was revealed according to 7 ahruf indicates that a certain amount of variation in the text was considered legitimate, even normal, in the earliest days of Islam. Right? This initial allowance was then reduced by Caliph Uthman with the agreement of the companions to unify the community on one textual skeleton or razm, albeit allowing for various readings or Qira'at, such as the 7 and the 10, within the confines of the razm. And then why 7 harfs rather than any other number? Most people say either that there are 7 basic tribal groupings among the Arabs or 7 pure dialects, right? Both of these are nothing more than empty claims with no evidence to back them up. And that's Ibn Jazari. He says that the word 7 is not intended to indicate an exact number, but rather indicates a large amount, a breadth, an ease, and availability.
Yeah, I see. I wasn't aware. I knew Yasin Dalton had rejected the idea of the dialects of them just being 7 dialects, but I didn't realize that he got this from Al Jazari, the very guy that made the Qur'an go from 7 to 10. I wasn't aware of that, so that's really interesting.
Yeah. So there's a great deal. Actually, let me show you something else that might be of interest to you. Also, when you go to the Encyclopedia of Islam, which is the gold standard academic reference, it actually differs from a number of other sources. It either includes or excludes. And in fact, I discovered like in the latest revision, it contradicts itself on some things. It's crazy. Like, so which one do we believe? So this is from George Sale, who did a translation of the Quran in the 1630s, of all things. Now we're going back 1630. That's how many years ago? 400 years. Right?
Yeah.
And this is the Quran, the Al-Quran of Muhammad, right, from the original Arabic by George Sale, and this was published in 1891. And he says, I have never yet seen any manuscript where the verses are numbered, although in some copies the number of verses in each chapter is written down after the title, right? And the Mohammedans have a scruple in making an actual distinction in their copies because the chief disagreement between their several editions of the Quran is in the division and the number of the verses. Having mentioned different editions of the Quran, there are 7 principal editions, right, which were published and used at Medina, Mecca, Kufa, Basra, Syria, and that's a difference, and a 7th called the Common or Vulgar. And of these editions, the first of Medina makes the whole number of verses 6,000 verses. The second and fifth, 6,214, 6,219, 6,236, 6,226, 6,225.
Yeah. So I want people to understand how significant this actually is. And I think sometimes we miss this because they have the idea of perfect preservation. Every part of their text of the Quran has been perfectly preserved. That also includes every word, every letter, and also every verse. Now, what makes this substantial is that in their hadith material, Muhammad supposedly makes reference to the verses. So, in other words, according to Muhammad anyway, the Quran has built-in verses. And if you read, I read Dr. Yasser Qadi, he has a book, An Introduction to the Sciences of the Quran. In it, he actually explains the methodology for how the companions of Muhammad used to know what was a verse and what wasn't. And it basically just boils down to Muhammad would have a long pause when he's speaking, like this. And that supposedly tells people when a new verse ends and a new one has started. But because that's incredibly ambiguous, the companions didn't really get that and they didn't quite agree on all of this. So that meant that there's now all these different traditions about where verses end and where verses start. And of course, if you allow for that, then you end up with different numbers of verses. depending on which region and which qira'ah you're reading. But that's problematic theologically because there are traditions where Muhammad says, if you read the last 10 verses of, say, for example, Surah Baqarah, then you get so-and-so blessing. But wait, what are the last 10 verses of Surah Baqarah? It depends on which qira'ah you read. That determines what the last 10 are. So that actually has serious theological impacts. And also, again, these verses are built into the Quran, but we don't know them. They're in debate. So if they're in debate, and keep in mind, Muhammad never said, by the way, there's 7 different verse types. So there's no like backing for explaining this in the Sunnah. So what do you do about the fact that there's like all these different verse numbering systems? Which is the correct one? Which is the one that's on the eternal tablet?
I have asked that many times. I don't get an answer. I have a copy of the Quran from the 1600s, and I'm looking for it now. I'm just trying to, man, I have a copy somewhere, and now I can't find it. But I have one, and it's, good grief. Where did I put it? I would love to find it, but so I have a copy from the 1600s, an old Quran, and yeah. It's definitely, there are certainly differences. So yeah, there's that. He goes on in this book he goes on to say, there's a second page. No, that was it. No, that was that for that page. Yeah. And so is there anything that Muslim scholars actually agree upon? Is there any kind of basis for saying we have the Uthmani Quran, never mind the Muhammadan Quran, the Uthmanic Quran, because we don't even have that. And then you've got Ibn Mujahid, who creates 7 different versions when supposedly Uthman created a single version. And then, of course, you had the issues with Ubay ibn Ka'b and who's the other guy?
Abdullah ibn Masud.
Abdullah ibn Masud. They couldn't agree. And eventually they decided that they would finally go along with things. Let me actually bring up Mujahid. And then let's have a look at Ibn Mujahid. For instance, Ibn Shanabud, a contemporary and fallow reader, he was a Quranic reader as well, a fallow reader of Ibn Mujahid, complied with the new Quran only after he was taken to court, sentenced, and flogged. Yeah, because he disagreed with that Quran.
And Farid responds. I don't know if you've heard of that guy, but he actually brought this up and mentioned that he was aware that there was Ibn Shanabuth, or however you pronounce his name. And he was aware that, he was beaten for not adhering to the accepted range of Qurans that Ibn Mujahid standardized.
Right.
If any product on sale today had these many variants, it would be termed a bad ripoff. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get this. Let's have a quick look at Uthman ibn Affan, because this might be interesting. So hold on. I know this is relevant. If I were going through the presentation step by step, this would be relevant. But actually, maybe let me bring up something else just to throw something in the mix here. So Ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b were transmitted in early scholarly literature through various means. These readings refer to differences in the recitation of wording. And here's what we know. Ibn Masud was one of the companions of Prophet Muhammad, right, and a prominent reciter of the Quran. He had his own collection, which differed from the Uthmanic Codex. Ibn Masud's readings were discussed and recognized within scholarly tradition in Kufa, where his readings were popular for at least a century, right? That's from academia.edu. That's a paper on that, the legal estimate. You can read that yourselves, guys. Ubay ibn Ka'b, another companion, expertise in the recitation, had his own collection, which also differed, and he's included additional phrases and variations in wording. His recitation was also recognized. So even though supposedly Uthman burned all the other versions, these stayed around for at least another 100 years. And now the Yemeni Codex is said to be a variant of one of these with even more variations than these two had.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like, they say that they had consensus on what the Quran was. There was definitely not consensus. There may have been like a compromise where, when threatened with violence and lots of other bad things, I assume, they eventually did capitulate. But originally, there was different companions. Abdullah ibn Masud and Ubay ibn Ka'b were considered the master reciters of the Quran.
Yes.
But here's a question. Here's a very interesting question, Lloyd. When Uthman was standardizing his Quran and he put it into 114 chapters, he had Zayd bin Tabir and a team of scribes to go out and do this, and he got, Hafsa's Quran from under a pillow. But why didn't he have Abdullah ibn Masud or Ubay ibn Ka'b there, two of the master reciters of the Quran?
Maybe those versions didn't suit his theological leanings.
Yeah, seems suspicious, doesn't it? It's almost as if he knew there were differences and didn't want to involve them. Interesting.
And why wouldn't he go to the earliest companions of Muhammad, directly to them, right?
Yeah, people who had memorized either the whole or at least very large parts of the Quran. I mean, they even had their own codex. They were in charge of teaching and leading prayer in certain regions of the Islamic Empire. I mean, yeah, it seems kind of like those are the guys you'd want to go to. But
yeah,
for some reason they
don't
didn't
get
an invite.
So back to the 24 Codex, because we discussed this just briefly before we started. You said so to just bring up your thoughts on the 24 Codex, and maybe I'll throw in a few more things, and we can just to get people thinking about these questions. And we need to get these questions out to the public so people can start asking apologists. I want hard answers to these questions. Put them on the back foot. So any thoughts about the 24 Codex that you might want to ask, or things you want to raise?
So I'm interested in having like as much detail about what specifically was sort of standardized. I've heard some things that I need to look into. I don't know if you've looked into this yet, but apparently there's multiple different understandings of the Hafs Rawiyah. Supposedly there wasn't just one Hafs Rawiyah, there was more than one.
Okay,
so that's interesting. That's Shady Nasser, I think. I need to continue reading on his stuff about that.
Right.
So again, they completely failed to just have like
talking about that. Yeah, I will be bringing up some of these papers. I will be discussing, because I mean, this is going to be a series that I'll be going through like several episodes, because it's hard to discuss everything in one episode. But it's odd that Hafs was chosen by these scholars of Al-Azhar. I mean, he's not even the earliest, right?
Yeah.
Notice he is one of two transmitters, right, of one of the Qira'at. Now, why didn't they go directly to the Qira'at? Why did they go to a transmitter? If they have the Qira'at, why do they go to the transmitter? Right? And then this guy's from Kufa, not from Mecca, not from Medina, he's from Iraq.
Yeah.
Now, if you have the Qira'at that's authoritative, why go to one of the transmitters? And then there's certain issues around Hafs. We'll get into Hafs as well. And then, of course, in 1924, they release it after 17 years of editing to correct the Quran. 17 years. They release it in 24. It gets edited in 1936. Why would the perfect Quran need editing in 1936 and an update? Then, because it is high quality printing, because it was, and also it is the very first Quran to be endorsed by an Islamic authority. It is the first Quran to be endorsed by a Muslim authority. So were there no other Qurans that were endorsed? Was there a free-for-all? I mean, these are questions that I ask. I mean, I'll let you continue for a moment, and then I can dive into some of the other questions around this. 24.
Yeah, they're really good. I mean, what I think is, if we go back far enough, right, the Hafs Ruwiyah, the Hafs reading wouldn't be that popular. There'll be other ones that are either just as popular or maybe even more popular, but they would all have different verse ordering stuff. So it must have been a nightmare to try and communicate between these kind of people just before all of this. Like, Muslims take it for granted today that they can just go on Quran.com, go to verse Surah 225 or whatever, and it's always going to be the same thing. But that was not historically the case at all. That was actually very contentious.
Just had a really
I like that one. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. It's the 3 plus the 7, the 14 plus the 9 is 1. Is equal to 1. Like, what's wrong with Christian maths? Well said, Arnold. Well said. Yeah, and also, why choose
it is crazy.
Like,
this is what they're saying now, right? They're saying the Quran is like an umbrella term for like. Oh, did I cut out there?
No, you did not.
No. Okay,
you're good.
Cool.
You're good.
So the Quran is like an umbrella term for basically lots of Qurans. I find that idea just amazing, really.
But I mean, that's real-time propaganda? It's real-time gaslighting.
Yeah, well, and it's real-time thinking on the spot and trying to adjust your religion to solve problems. And that's what I think is amazing about it. We're seeing Muslims, both the laymen and the scholars of all kinds, just coming up with stuff to try and avoid it. And this, I think, is what Yasser Qadi was afraid of. This is why you have the, holes in the narrative. Don't push me for an answer. I don't want to give an answer. Western scholarship is gone leaps and bounds ahead of us at this point, and they're finding issues that we don't really have an answer for. And I think it's stuff like this, basically.
And also, why choose a late copy from 800 roughly? Why not go to a 632 Quran?
Yeah, they do not have the Uthmanic codexes anymore. None of them have survived.
They don't have the Mohammedan codex. They don't have the Uthmanic codex.
Nope.
What are we left with? And so Hafs, we'll get more into Hafs. And then of course, in Egypt, what happens is the Saudis in 84 decide, hey, you know what? We can write our own Quran. This Quran business could be great. So the Saudis decide, hey, we're Saudi Arabia. Let's make our own Quran. So that in 84, 85, they released their own Quran, also based on Hafs, because Hafs has now become very, very popular, right? Why didn't they go to a memorizer, to one of the Hufaz, a Hafiz, one and say, hey, buddy, just dictate. We'll record you as we go, and and then also, or just write down what you know, please. And then the Egyptians eventually adopt, and across North Africa, they adopt the Warsh edition. And Warsh is from 812, even later. And now this is the most popular Quran in North Africa and Egypt. And of course, the Saudi version based on Hafs has now become sort of the dominant Quran across the world. But it still hasn't eliminated all of these versions either.
Yeah. And you see, that's the problematic thing. Muslims were, in a sense, conned into believing that there was only one Quran. And it was, in effect, due to the unforeseen consequences and success of the Al-Azhar project.
See, this guy's saying Birmingham manuscript, end of discussion, right?
Yeah, so we already addressed that. And
2 pages. 2 pages. We have 2 pages that are divergent and contain Christian apocrypha. Not even Muslim stories. So go on.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already been through this earlier, J-Bon, if you want to go back on the stream and look at it. But we demonstrated how it's problematic for you and how it demonstrates that actually it probably predates Muhammad if you take the radiocarbon dating as golden. So good luck with that.
Good luck even the Median age of 610 predates Muhammad's prophetic career, which means the Quran was finished prior, even if you take the median age, which is typical. Let's have a further look at this whole Hafs story. Let's have a look at some of the orthographical differences, right? Let's have a look at Hafs versus Warsh. Al-Shamadli. So the Al-Shamadli Mus'haf, now the Egyptians are following the Al-Shamadli Mus'haf, which isn't even on that list I showed you guys. And it follows the narration of Warsh, An-Nafi, right? So the Al-Shamadli Mus'haf became the most widespread Mus'haf in the Arab lands after the 1924 Cairo, until the Saudis published theirs in 84, 85, right? So the Shamadli is now popular in Egypt, overtaking the Cairo edition, right? Other countries also have their own national printing, such as the Morocco, which uses also the Warsh An-Nafi. So, why do we need competing editions?
That's a good point.
Now he says the Quran is orally memorized by millions. So why are there differences today? And why did the Saudis and the Egyptians, why did Al-Azhar University take 17 years to figure out which is the correct version to put on paper? That would be very interesting. And which one is the one that is with Allah in paradise? Which one was sent down word for word, letter for letter? So,
just real quick as well, why is it that some of the Quran has been lost orally? Like, for example, the mysterious letters, they were revealed, and yet you guys don't know what they are? Did the oral tradition fail there? Why is it that there are some schools of fiqh that say the Bismillah is a verse of the Quran, but others say it isn't? Did that oral tradition fail there to preserve how many verses there are in the Quran? Why do you have competing traditions of how many verses there are in the Quran? You guys can't even agree on that. How did that happen if the oral tradition is perfect? There are tons of reasons why the old tradition is obviously failed. It's not even controversial. The old tradition is terrible.
Not listening to facts. He's simply spouting propaganda. He's just reciting propaganda because he has no answers. He cannot answer that. He's just going to spout propaganda. Let's have a look again at, so let's go have a look at this. Let's actually look at Warsh. Oops. So the prevalence of Hafs versus Warsh, let's actually go into that then. I mean, there's no point talking to him at this point. I've just put him in timeout for a little bit. So Hafs and Warsh, okay, the Hafs is apparently across 90% of Muslims. The Warsh, approximately 10% of Muslims, mostly North Africa, but other places too, not only there. These two variants emerged from the students or transmitters of the canonical Quranic readers who lived over a century after Prophet Muhammad. So these emerged well over a century, up to 200 years after Muhammad. They're both considered authentic. Now, I thought when Allah was giving when Jibreel was reciting the Quran to Muhammad, did Jibreel repeat it 7 times or just once?
Well, they would tell you now that yes, Jibreel actually did say it in 7 different ways. In fact, in the Sunnah, Muhammad asks for it. He basically says, look, you've given me the recitation of the Quran in one way, but in order to make this easier for the people that I'm talking to, and he says, like, the elderly, the women, and the children, can you please give me it in more modes? And Jibreel's like, yeah, sure. And then he keeps increasing it until he gets to 7. Which I think doesn't really make any sense. And I don't know how it would help with the elderly, the women, and the young, but that's what their tradition says. And yeah, you would have to believe. And it gets a bit weird because on the final Ramadan, when Muhammad was reciting all of the Quran with Jibreel, because he used to recite all of the Quran during Ramadan, you would have to accept in the final year, he did it 14 times. Well, actually, no, if you accept this 14 Qira'at, you would have to think he did it 28 times, I guess. That's a lot of time that Muhammad is reciting the Quran.
14 plus 28 transmitters, because there's 2 transmitters per Qira'at.
And they differ.
We haven't even established exactly how many Qira'at there are. Right, even that's in doubt.
Actually, yeah.
Now,
well, that is like a landmine. Go on.
Yeah, sorry, go on. No, your thoughts. Your thoughts are great. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, okay, so according to early scholars, there was at least, I mean, it's more accurate to say like 70 at this point, but I just take the conservative number of 25 because I've seen a Muslim say that. There's at least 25 Qira'ah at the time of Mujahid before he standardized it into 7.
25.
So you tell, first of all, that means that there's a significant part of the Islamic Empire that's not actually reciting the Quran. That's what that means, right?
Yes. Now,
because it isn't canonized. Yeah, go on.
No, sorry, go on. Sorry to interrupt you. Just,
No, it's all right. So basically, you have 25 different known Qur'an that's been recited by imams in prayer. So again, very serious now. But Ibn Mujahid comes on and goes, no. Only 7 of those are actually valid. So in effect, he's just eliminated all the other ones as not valid. They have not been reciting the Quran correctly.
Yeah, but then a guy comes 200 years later and goes, Ibn Mujahid didn't do such a great job. We got to add another 10 or 12 or 6 or 9 or...
Got to add these 2 transmitters. And then in the 15th century, then you
have the 15th century.
Jazari, that's the one. He comes in and just expands it, because why not?
We need 9 more. It's like... Yeah, because I like these 9. These guys are my buddies. So yeah, so basically, people obviously will tell us these are considered minor variations in vocalization, meaning pronunciation, spelling, or verse numbering. Others argue there are substantive differences. For instance, Surah 2, 125, Hafs says, "You shall take." Warsh has, "They have taken, they have made." Now, you can do different translations and you will get different scholars or different books will have slightly different variations of what these things actually mean. I can go through a couple. I have 2 or 3 in my notes here in this. But you shall take, they have taken. Isn't that slightly different? You will do, you have done.
Yeah, definitely looks like a difference. And of course, when you change indexicals like you or they or I, then you radically change the meaning, right? There's a whole world of difference between
it,
I had
they
cake.
stole it. So who gets...
Sorry, go on.
Yes, sir. Go on.
No, I was going to say, so you have other parts in the Quran where there's Qira'at differences where it changes you to I. And that's massively different, right? If I said, you ate a cake, and then I said, I ate a cake, how on earth are those the same statements? They're not. They're radically different because who I am ascribing the action to changes.
So imagine this is now a legal matter. You inherit $1 million. They inherit $1 million. It's the same thing, right? Dot for
Yeah,
dot, letter
exactly
for
right.
letter.
Yep, and it's actually very simple in the Arabic to do this. This is why indexicals are actually a very common thing in the Quran. People are like, "Is it meant to be this or this?" And it's like, well, it kind of makes sense if you read it this way or and this way. So, and that's where you get the in doubt verses where people aren't sure. So
Well, Sergeant Grinch
I
says
like
he
cake.
likes cake. Cake's good. Yes, yes, you're right. So see, he's obviously trained in Muslim apologetics. Surah 3, 146. Hafs has fought while Warsh has were killed in reference
Yep.
to prophets.
Well, like fighting and being killed are not the same thing.
Yeah, and both are
So
variants that are officially printed and accepted by institutions like the King Fahd complex in Saudi Arabia because they're identical, letter for letter, dot for dot, and the message is the same. So the differences apparently, as they tell us, do not impact the core message of the Quran according to the majority Muslim view, which obviously, if you disagree, will get you killed. I can understand why they would agree.
yeah,
So to me, that's
yeah.
damage control.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's have a look. So so this is now slightly different. You shall take, they have taken. Wattaqazu, these are the English transliterations. So yakuluna, you say, they say, takuluna, watakazu, watakizu. Apparently, these little variations make significant difference between the two Qurans. Then you've got Hafs, miskinin, poor person, poor people.
Ah, yeah. Pluralities are another problem. Like
This,
sometimes the difference between a singleness and many of them is very minor. So yeah, feeding a single person, feeding people is another one that we just saw there.
yeah. So hold on, what was that one? Miskinin, right? Actually,
I'm not
poor.
sure. Go back and have a look.
Here we go. Here we go. This one is miskinin, a poor, male singular, right? And this version is, which one am I using? Sorry. Yeah, but that just to show that you guys can go to Quranics.com and you can have a look at different versions. So you bring out the transliteration of different versions of the Quran, right? And you'll be able to find the differences between the Qurans yourself. So you can actually go through that and you can see that just there on your own. Just to highlight that. Yeah, your thoughts? Any?
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm trying to find. There's a website that shows this really clear.
Yeah, I have
The
notes, but
Quran.
the thing is, my slides are not 100% finished. They're still, the earlier slides are fine, but the later slides I'm still busy work. So I have different versions of this, and it's all like he fought, was killed. Katala, Kutila, Quran 40:26, Hafs, Awan, or that, and that. So look, you can have chicken or you can have fish. You can have chicken and fish.
Well, I like chicken and fish, so I hope it's the Wash translation.
Yeah, but understand these can have significant legal differences. These can have significant legal implications. Why are Muslims lying to us about these differences? I mean, at what point is it just propaganda? I mean, this guy that came on earlier, he's not listening to us. He's just pushing a line of propaganda. Ibadu, slaves, warsh, inda, with. Okay, we can have slaves. All right, go with that guy and go pick up some chocolates at the store. That's a big difference. With and slaves. I'd say that's a fairly significant difference.
Yeah.
So these are not just phonetic differences, they extend to semantics and they alter the interpretation of verses. That do actually alter the interpretation of verses. So this is not just minor differences. And also they conveyed these texts without a fully developed system of diacritical marks, leading to variations in readings. Yeah. Did you find your references you wanted to bring up?
It's like the Quran corpus or something. If Mel's there, he might know possibly.
Corpus Coranicum. Corpus Coranicum. What
That's
do you
it.
want?
Yeah, yeah.
Let
Just
me
because it
get you the
shows.
link.
Yeah, it shows. I only found it like a week or so ago or something, and it turned out actually that's really really useful for just seeing the variants.
Yeah, I'll just drop the link in the chat.
Nice, nice.
There it is.
Yeah, it's the institution that like owns it is German, right? Which is pretty
Do you
cool.
want to share anything? I mean, go ahead, right?
No. I was just saying, like we could go through a lot of these that you've raised up on that website, but
Yeah, I have some notes, additional notes that I haven't quite put up. And also Ibn Mujahid is from Baghdad, right? And he chooses these 7 readings. And he wrote a book called the Kitab al-Sabah fi al-Qira'at. Right?
Yeah.
So he chooses these readings, and his work standardized and preserved, supposedly, these authoritative methods of Quranic recitation. So that even then they couldn't decide what was official, which was the one that Allah gave to Muhammad, which is the one on the tablets, right? I mean, so I really would love to know. And then let's continue, maybe if I can find these differences with Hafs and Warsh. Let's continue here.
Good to see you too, Francis.
Oh, Francis, yeah, I'll need to give him a call. Give you a call tomorrow, Francis. So let me see. They touch on theological. I've got some more information on Hafs. Okay, yeah, let's have a look at this. Actually, can I go through something prior to that just to provide more context?
Yeah.
Did you want to show something? Did you want to show anything, Chris?
Yeah, you need to give me some time to get it up. But this is about the Sana stuff.
Okay, I'll finish two pages, and I'll hand over to you while you get your thing together. So this is according to the Encyclopedia of Islam, Volume 5. Ibn Mujahid declared the reading of the Uthmanic text standardized by tradition and consensus to be obligatory. He compelled Ibn Miqsam to renounce the claim that he could decide for himself on the text. Ibn Mujahid recognized 7 readers, right? And to the 7 readers recognized by Ibn Mujahid, 3 others were added, and then another 4. So the 7, the 3, and the 4. Was it the 7, the 14, and the 9? Since Ibn Mujahid because in mentioning Asim, Nafsan Asim, right, one of the 7, he had often named 2 others. Asim had often named 2 others. And so they basically became customary to add also the names of 2 traditionists to each of the 7. Thus originated the bewildering number of names in the list of readers recognized as canonical. I mean, this goes way back already, right? This, however, did not completely rule out the uncanonical, deviant, or shawad readings. They were later adduced as useful evidence in the practical interpretation of the Quran and in the elucidation of linguistic problems, right? However, about the Hafs reading, it becomes understandable that the official Egyptian Quran of 1924, following the reading of Asim in the tradition of Hafs, is not founded on early Quranic manuscripts, but it is the result of reconstructions derived from the literature on the readings. So the Hafs and Asim reading, right, the Hafs version, the 1924 Cairo Quran, is not founded on early Quran manuscripts. They could not verify that these Quran manuscripts that Muslims claim are so early and authentic were actually valid. So they had to go to and reconstruct what they thought was a valid Quran based on the opinions of scholars. Your thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, it's almost as if the Quran is not just one thing. It's many, many things. And they can't... I mean, it's a contentious thing, isn't it, right? To pick one. They were treading on ice. Actually, I don't know if it was in your stuff that said this, but there was a guy roughly at the same time that was trying to make the 10 different Quran readings more well known, and he went to like Al Azhar University to do this, and they were in the process of putting together the Cairo edition in 1924, and so they basically got back to him and said, "No, we're not going to do this because it would cause too many arguments, so we're not going to do it."
Wow. You know what? We need to find someone who can go through the sources in Arabic. Send me the sources. I can have them translated or whatever. I mean, I can use machine translation if I have to. It'll be good enough for our purposes. But this information is not published in English. We need someone who can go through the sources in Arabic to find the history, to find the story of this Quran. Yeah. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, if we're happy with this, I'm going to talk about the Sana palimpsest stuff.
Yeah. So share your screen. Should be fine.
Right. So And this kind of explains why stuff is kind of problematic. So this is an image I took from Stephen Shoemaker's
Hold on,
book.
you're not sharing. Are you sharing? Okay, there you
No?
go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there we go.
There it is.
Is that big enough?
Just zoom in a bit. Yeah, just zoom in more. That's good.
Kind of like this. This is from Stephen Shoemaker, his book Creating the Quran, and he goes through some early manuscripts that we have of the Quran, and some of the earliest we have are from a collection of Sana that was found in the attic of a mosque. And as part of this collection, some of the manuscripts, it turns out, are palimpsests, which means that they have an underlying writing. So they have someone basically wrote on them a Quran, and then they later scrubbed that off and then wrote another Quran on top of it. So using ultraviolet, we can actually see what the underlying text is. And we can also date the parchment to see roughly when this comes about. And oh, nice one, Lloyd. There's a link there if you guys want to check his work out. I would highly recommend it if you're interested in this. What's interesting is that the dating that was given using radiocarbon analysis varies wildly, and also in many instances predates Muhammad. So we can see here so some of these are just bizarre. So for example, 127.1 folio 11 was dated in the Lyon radiocarbon center there, and it gave a range of 434 to 603. That's interesting.
434 to 603. That is insanity.
Yeah, that is quite worrying. And then there's another one here. So again, folio 13 this time, but on the same place. 406 to 543. So that one even predates Muhammad completely. That basically means that there's no way Muhammad could have said this, if this one's true. And we can go on for some others as well. Here's Leon again, 436 to 640. That's not possible. You end up with these dates that are just, yeah, I mean, they're not great. A lot of these aren't compatible with the Islamic narrative. They predate Muhammad. And because of this, they actually did the whole thing again, although with an updated reference calculation. I'm not the expert on radiocarbon analysis, but in effect, it's based off different hemispheres give different readings for how quickly the carbon life of something deteriorates in an area. So they updated it specifically for this. And then they gave these dates, which are still quite problematic. I mean, there's one here again, 415 to 574. That doesn't work. You still have this really awkward dating. And even then, some of the later ranges are still quite late. So this one says 774 to go up to 772, 773, 768, 767, 768 again. So the radiocarbon dating is a mess. And Stephen Shoemaker makes the argument that, yeah, something's wrong. Like, we're getting wildly radical dating from different carbon analysis of the same document. And the thing is that some people may say, oh, it's because it's being tampered with, right? Like, if you touch material, like sometimes you can leave marks on it that actually interfere with the dating. But the thing is when you do that, it makes the age like much later, right? Like it changes it in the sense of it makes the dating earlier because you've introduced more modern material. But that isn't the case here. So you end up with no way of really explaining this other than there's something wrong with the way we're radiocarbon dating these manuscripts. And I agree, because otherwise I would have to believe that there's a real chance that, yeah, you have a super early...
yeah, there are serious problems. So the dating is bad, the linguistic style, the lack of any kind of authority, the lack of any kind of direct line to Muhammad, I mean, there's just nothing but problems here.
Yeah. It's very problematic.
Yeah. Can I add something, maybe present something? I'll
Yeah. That's what I want to show there. Just it's important for people to know that these problems are real.
No, that's great. I mean, gee whiz. Hold on, let me just grab this. So on that score, so it becomes understandable that the official Egyptian Quran, following the reading of Asim in the tradition of Hafs, is not founded in early Quranic manuscripts, but the result of reconstructions from the literature of the Qira'at, not from the Qira'at themselves. Isn't that crazy? You have 7 canonical readings, and they go like, yeah, let's skip all that nonsense. Let's go find another way to do this. Isn't that weird? It's been memorized, but they won't use some guy who's memorized it. They've got early documents, but they don't use the early documents. Smelling a rat here. The official Egyptian Qur'an of 24 and its relationship to reconstruction derived from literature on the Qira'at readings. Now, that's a fascinatingly long article title.
Yeah.
The official Egyptian Qur'an of 1924 is based on the reading of Asim. The choice was made by the scholars who worked on the project, and it became the standard method of recitation in Egypt. The goal of the project was not to reconstruct the ancient form of the Quran, but to preserve one of the canonical Qira'at readings, specifically the Hafs and Asim version. Hold on, Hafs is a transmitter, not a Qira'at.
Yep.
So the choice, your thoughts, Chris?
Yeah, exactly that. So even what the actual Qira'at was supposed to be is in question. So they can't go to that. They have to pick one of the supposedly canonized transmitters of it and just hope that that's correct. And this kind of reminds me in the Dr. Yasser Qadi interview, Muhammad Ijab, he asked him, he said, if we get a blank Musaf and we had to write the Quran, what is it you would write? And he refused to do it. And I wonder if this is kind of the same thinking, right? They're like, we can't write the Quran because if we do, we'll eventually, and very soon, like in starting the process, come to one of these verses of difference where the Qur'an all say different things. And as soon as we pick one, we're in effect basically conforming to that Qur'an. And if we then start, we'd have to like pick from different ones, wouldn't they? Or they just pick one, and that's what they went with.
Trying to find a quote, and I'm not going to find it. But yeah, I mean, none of this. So they were loath to canonize one version because then that became the fixed version. Yeah, but I mean, Yasser Qadi, yeah, wow. Okay, so yeah. So the choice of Hafs and Asim reading for the official Quran was influenced by several factors. The Hafs reading was popular during the Ottoman period, and it was familiar to people. So it's the one that was popularized by the Ottomans. It wasn't the original Quran. It was made popular by the Ottomans in the 1800s. Additionally, go on.
No, I'm disagreeing with what you're saying so far.
Yeah, perfect multiple choice preservation. Yeah.
Where every choice is a correct choice.
Yeah. So Hafs is considered easier to teach and learn compared to other readings, which may have contributed. And the scholars in the project aim to produce a fixed text based on one pre-selected reading rather than examining different manuscripts and comparing variants to determine which is truly canonical. It looks like they couldn't decide. So they said, so they went like, bugger, we'll just, you know what, I'm tired. Let's just pick this one. We get paid anyway.
Maybe they were like, someone's already done the work for us, right? So we just go with this guy. Yeah, this guy says the Quran is this, and people seem to believe him. So
yeah, maybe they just flipped a coin.
Flip a coin, yeah, flip a coin.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, that's pretty much how that works. And I mean, then you've got the 7, the 3, and the 4, right? The 7, the 3, and the 4. But then, of course, you've got the 7, the 14, and the 9. Like, okay, where are we? Right? So this is just, so you've got readers who are Qurra, right? Prominent reciters from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, not even the 1st centuries. Why didn't they preserve 1st century Qira'at? Why?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Now, within the Bible, I mean, would you say that we try to go as early as possible? We go back as early as possible to get the earliest documents.
Yeah. The canonical Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are the earliest Gospels we have. It's the earliest material that gives an account of Jesus's life. It's totally the opposite in Islam, but yeah.
Yeah. So Warsh and Hafs are not Qira'at themselves, but rather transmitters of specific Qira'at. So Warsh was a transmitter of the reading of Nafi al-Madani, one of the 7 canonical readers. Hafs was a transmitter of Asim al-Kufi of Kufa in Iraq, another one of the 7 canonicals. The Qira'at refers to the methods of recitation established by the prominent reciters and scholars, such as Nafi and Asim. They had students who transmitted their recitations. Nafi and Asim were among the canonical readers who established authoritative methods of reciting the Quran. I thought there's only one method, not one of the authoritative methods. So yeah, I mean, this story makes no sense. Muslims, I just wish they would be honest, and I wish we can inform the world, and so we can start asking them questions and put them on the back foot about
Absolutely.
this stuff.
Do you know what their response is to this, though? Like, I'll just sort of summarize what they
Tell
would
me,
say.
please go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
They basically say that because the Sunnah, that their traditions tell them that the Quran has been given in 7 aruf, 7 different ways, that the Qira'at basically are just different collections of these 7 aruf. So basically, it becomes a pick and mix. So one Qira'at could be borrowing 3 of that aruf, and then another Qira'at could be borrowing 2, and then another one has maybe 4, and maybe one has just 1. And that's how the Quran is preserved in the Qira'at. And of course,
that made no sense to me. My head hurts from just trying to think.
Yeah, just even thinking. And also, it's kind of funny because wait, we haven't even got off the ground yet. What is the aruf? What is it? Like, tell me what it is. Like, tell me, give me an example of 2 of the aruf. And they can't. They just have to go to a Qira'ah that comes centuries later and be like, oh, it's this. And it's like, okay. Well, first of all, in most cases, you don't have 7. You have like 3 or 4 for a particular verse at most. So what happened to the other 3? And how do you even know that aruf applied to every verse? Because that wasn't told to you. It was applied to the Quran in general. So they have to make all these assumptions, and they can't prove a single one of them. And Dr. Yasir Qadhi says all this in his book. Like, I'm just quoting what he's saying, basically. He's like, yeah, we don't know for definite what the aruf are, and we don't know how the aruf... okay, so they don't even know if it survived. They don't know, and it is a contentious issue in Islam, in the early scholars, whether or not the aruf, the 7 aruf that Muhammad supposedly revealed the Quran in, whether or not they're still around today. They don't know.
Wow.
There's one opinion that says only 1 aruf survives today, and it's basically the Uthmanic Codex, because obviously he burned all the stuff, right? Uthman made a Quran, and he standardized
the Egyptians they dropped all the other Qurans in the Nile.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think that's crazy, that story. But yeah, so Uthman, he made his codex, and since there's only 1 Uthmanic codex, there must only be 1 half, or 1 of the 7 aruf left. Yeah, the others must have died. But there's other scholars that say no. The oral tradition, like that J-Bo guy was talking about, and how amazing that was, said that the oral tradition, the companions would not have abandoned what Muhammad had revealed as the Quran. It's not thinkable that they would have done that. So the aruf must still be around. But they understand that they can't explain what it is or how it happened. So they basically make a concession and they say, some of that aruf is preserved in Uthman's codex. And we don't know what those are. We just say that some of them. And then there's another group that says, no, all of them are preserved. So all 7 aruf are still around today, and we still have them, and they are found in the Qira'at. We just can't tell you what they are, where they come from, or anything else. It's basically just held on faith that these aruf will be preserved.
That's nuts. Dude, this is honestly...
Yeah.
I want to bring this up from the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 13. Guys, description box, or at least you'll find it in my Google archive. So, harf, singular, plural, huruf, or ahruf. Now, according to the official definition from these top scholars of Islam, letter of the alphabet and word. Okay, fine. In grammar, articulation of the Arabic language. Okay, great. A Quranic reading or dialect. Excellent. Now, dialect, that should not state that the word is still tomato. Whether you say tomato, tomato, or tomato, it's still the same spelling. So that shouldn't affect the word. However, as I've mentioned to you before, it has another meaning. Okay, the science of the ahruf, or the science of the huruf. Want to read that, Chris?
Onomatomancy, I hope I got that right, a magical practice based on the occult properties of the letters of the alphabet and of the divine and angelic names which they form.
It's
Interesting.
number letter magic. It's basically their form of gematria. It's their magic. So the words all have magical numbers. They belong to the elements: earth, air, fire, water, stuff like that. It's a whole. And in fact, this definition is the longest one of all of these definitions, these sub definitions here. This one, these are very short. They'll just say, it's a letter of the alphabet. You don't need to explain that. This one takes several pages to explain.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's very interesting. And I imagine like Sufi Muslims would be quite interested in the magical practice definition of that word.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. This stuff gets deep. Once you start digging into this, you start to find it has got magic and spells and spell casting all over it.
So in my head, I just imagine like there's a water Qur'an, a fire Qur'an. Yeah.
There are fire words, water sentences, stuff like that. And each letter has an occult property and magical property, but the words as well. You have like fire surahs, water surah. I mean, this is alchemy, alchemical magic. So it's designed for spell casting. That's the whole story behind that. So that's another thing there, just to mention that.
Yeah.
So
I'm just going to add a little bit to the Uthmanic thing. So you remember before I said that, okay, so Uthman made his codex, right? Well, he didn't just make one codex. He made a codex that he made copies of and sent them out to different regions of the Islamic Empire.
Right,
so
right.
One to Kufa, to Basra, to Damascus, to so on and so forth. But they aren't uniform. They actually have variants in them. And we know this because early Islamic scholars talked about it. They said, in our reading of the Uthmanic Musaf, meaning book, we see that they have this verse as saying this. But we know in Medina, they say it differently. They say this. And what's interesting is, first of all, that's not perfect preservation, right? Uthman, you're supposed to make the Quran in one uniform copy without variants or mistakes, but it looks like that didn't happen. So that's not perfect. But what's interesting is Muslims will take this, and this is an actual academic opinion, that the Aruf is preserved at least partially in the Uthmanic Codex because of these variants. So in other words, the Aruf has survived in the variants of the different regions, and that's how we still have them. But the issue is that these variants are actually kind of minor, because although he made mistakes, they weren't like crazy mistakes. They're very minor, according to like Marin van Putten and others. So they're not substantial enough to include the Aruf. Like, you can't cram it in there. There just isn't room to do it.
Right.
So it looks like, to me anyway, 6 out of 7 Aruf, or 6 out of 7 of the different ways the Quran was recited in, are lost. We don't have them. And so when
dude, this is a mess.
It's crazy. Yeah, there's no answer to this. They just play weird games of this. Maybe the Aruf is like all spread out between the Qira'at. And it's like, well, you can't tell me what the Aruf are. The Qira'at changed over time. Like, many Qira'at is now lost because like Ibn Mujahid was like, no, stop doing that. That's wrong. How do you know that Aruf wasn't in that guy's Qira'at? You have no idea. So you have no idea of knowing what the Aruf is, how it was preserved, if it is preserved. And common sense tells us, no, in the Uthmanic recension, he destroyed them all. But they're all Quran.
These people have no leg to stand on. You know, one manuscript page is better than the most outrageous claim to memory. And it's so convenient. And to Val, thank you very much. Short answer, nobody knows what ahruf means. It's a mathematical miracle. Allah knows best. All ham to Allah. Yes. And guys, by the way, I will be on with Val, second show with him on Thursday evening. That'll be 9 p.m. my time. We were trying to do Wednesday, but my schedule is crazy this week. And I mean, yesterday, Chris and I spoke, and I said, hey, look, I can do tomorrow. Can you do tomorrow? Because otherwise it would have been really difficult to schedule. And I'm having to do 9 p.m. because I will be running around like crazy. I'll be getting home late, and I'm going to have to, so with Val as well, thank you. He was very kind enough to accommodate me, as was Chris. So yeah, we're doing our second part of our show on Thursday. I'll be discussing Martin Luther, the history there, and so hopefully see you there. I'll post the links as soon as they're available. So Thank you, Val, for your generosity. Much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of days. Yeah, I want to go back to the slides here. I want to bring up this. I mean, these are things I will be discussing as I go step by step, page by page through my presentation. And you have these notes, and as I update them, the original set online in the cloud will update, so you'll have my latest notes. Haytham Sidki, Consonantal Dotting and the Oral Qur'an, 2023, showed that canonical and non-canonical readings have a common oral ancestor, out of which the variant readings emerged from perhaps shortly after the Uthmanic canonization. So this reinforces your statement. Let me just go see this summary. Let me actually just go there so that I bring up the notes so everyone can see. This here, that's his document. Hisham or Haytham Sidki International. So this is a summary. I will drop this in the chat. Okay, I'm going to drop this in the chat right now. So you guys can have a look at that. So there are lots of these readers you've never heard of. For instance, why didn't they use Ibn Kathir, Chris? Because Ibn Kathir is highly respected. I mean, Ibn Kathir is highly respected in Islam. Why did they give it a miss? Right? I don't understand that. Yeah. Right? And then why didn't they take someone who's early? Why not an early version? I mean, even Amir, right? I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. So this is an article that Consonantal Dotting, and this is a summary of it by a guy called Marijn van Patten. So yeah, or Marijn van Patten is writing about this, right? A summary of Haytham Sidki's New York. Marijn van Putten, okay, by the way, Consonantal Dotting. So a careful study of the consonantal dotting patterns between canonical readings reveals independent Medinan, Meccan, Basran, that's in Basra in Iraq, and Kufan regional dottings. So you had a difference between two different regions of Iraq.
Yes.
So in Iraq, there were already differences, independent, and even Mecca and Medina had differences. And then the Basran version was close to the Meccan. People spread the common ancestor oral tradition into, no, but it was perfectly memorized through oral recitation. Where did I read that correctly? Oral variants?
Yep, oral variants, yeah.
Accrued, leading to the emergence of dozens of Qira'at, 10 of which were eventually canonized, or 14, or 9, or 32. I don't know. I've got to take off my socks so I can count more than 10. I mean, so I have problems coming from Africa, but, you know, I mean, so don't make me remove my socks, please. It can be cold out here in Poland. So after which it was not possible to tell which, if any, went back to Muhammad. Two of the top scholars on the subject. We can't tell which, if any, went back to Muhammad. We just don't know. Claims of mutawatir transmission emerged even later. No wonder Al-Jazari said that's a bunch of hogwash. Dr. Shadi Nasser, go on, please, go on.
No. Yeah, I'm agreeing with this. Yeah. Exactly right.
So Shadi Nasser thinks that the oral transmission underwent editing, scrupulous editing and revisions. In other words, lots and lots of detailed, heavy editing and revisions. In his book, The Second Canonization of the Qur'an, 936, Brill 2020, page 1, 5-8, and 257. He starts on page 1 with these accusations, right? Let's call them out nasty accusations about the Quran. Shadi Nasser states that the dominant and strongest opinion among the Muslim scholars holds to the non-tawatir of the canonical readings.
Yep,
the canonical readings
going to be a problem.
Yeah, the majority of scholars hold to non-tawatir. So the canonical readings are not considered to be reliable. We don't even know if this goes back to, never mind, they can't even prove it goes back to Uthman, right? It's possible now that not Ibn Mujahid, who's not Ibn Mujahid, who's the guy that came after him?
Al-Jazari.
Sorry?
Al-Jazari? For the expanding
Not Al-Jazari, the guy that probably started Islam, the warlord, the big, powerful empire builder. What was his name?
Abdul Malik.
Abdul Malik. Abdul Malik, probably for the sake of authority, backdated his Quran to the time of Uthman to give it credibility, because it's very likely that Abdul Malik was the one who canonized the new Quran and then changed the history, backdating his to give it some sort of authenticity by claiming this is the one that came from Uthman. Yeah.
You know what's really weird? At the time of Abdul Malik, he had a guy who used to work for him called Al-Hijjaj. And in one of the most important Christian polemical works that I think is in the 10th century or the 9th century,
Yeah.
it's by a guy called Al-Kindi. He actually, basically, when he's arguing with Muslims, he refers to this guy, Al-Hajjaj, and he's like,
Yeah.
because we all know that Al-Hajjaj changed stuff in the Quran, and he
Right.
rewrote
Right.
the Quran, which is really interesting, right? Like, you've got this Christian guy who's just writing to a Muslim in a polemical style, saying, hey, you know about Al-Hajjaj, you know he was Abdul Malik's right-hand man, and you know he changed stuff in the Quran. He had a whole copy made, and then he had others destroyed. It's like, whoa, that's interesting. Like, he doesn't need to, he doesn't like feel he needs to substantiate that with arguments. He just says it as a matter of fact.
Can you repeat that for the audience? That would be very helpful. Just again, yeah.
Yeah. So
for me as well, because man, this is all news to me as well. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm trying to think of roughly somewhere between 690 to
because Al-Hajjaj was the right-hand man of Abdul Malik.
Abdul Malik, yeah. And Al-Hajjaj, supposedly, according to a Christian who was writing, to be fair, he's writing like 100 or 200 years after this, but he's writing in a polemical style to Muslims. He's having a debate and he's writing letters. And in a document called the Apology of Al-Kindi, he basically says, so you Muslims know that your Quran went through this process, and he has a very interesting view of how the Quran came to be. But he says Al-Hajjaj, the right-hand man of Abdul Malik was a caliph, by the way. He was charged in rewriting the Quran, and then after he had done it, he had somehow destroyed or got rid of the older Quran that was there at the time. But he doesn't feel the need to substantiate that. He doesn't give reason. Right. He just says, like, he just says
because that's common knowledge. Because that's
because he assumes the Muslim knows this already happened, which implies that it was a common polemic against Muslims at the time.
Yeah, let me add this, and then I'll add something from Peridot, Karan. So he notes that the canonical readings, this is Shadi Nasr, were initially transmitted via single strands, ahad, between the Prophet and the canonical readers, rendering their mutawatir status questionable, right? Now, that's historical detail and historical fact. Ahad, singular, ahad, in the science of tradition of the hadiths and so on and the sunnah, are traditions from a relatively small number of transmitters. In this case, only one. Not enough to make them mutawatir. To make something mutawatir, it needs 25 transmitters. That's the general sort of view. Although they'll go like because feelings is sufficient to make it mutawatir. I mean, that'll come up next shortly. But in this case, a single transmitter makes something a weak hadith. Not even weak, it makes it a highly questionable hadith. Right? There's another word for that. I can't remember what it is. But ahad, this is not mutawatir by any stretch. And Al-Kindi, then you've got John of Damascus, who comes along and he writes that, they've got 3 books. I think he called them the cow, the table, and something. The women, the cow, and the table. He mentions 3 separate books, and then he mentions a long story of a verse of a book called the camel, right? Yep. And he spends the majority of his time in his writings on. I'm actually going to be doing this one on. I've actually written the script already. I just need to publish it. I need to edit and make a video and then publish. But the script is already written on my John of Damascus book, video. But so he writes about 3 separate books. He identifies 3 books: the cow, the women, and the table. And then he speaks at length, much, much more length, about the camel story, which is ridiculous. Camel that drinks up a river, camel that goes to heaven, drinks up the rivers, and the camel just upset, eats everything, drinks everything. That's like super camel. But this story is barely referenced in the Quran today.
The fact that it is also suspicious because his claim is twofold. First of all, these are books. He calls them books. So supposedly there's a book of the woman. There's a book of the cow, which implies they're separate, right? And he also mentions the book of the camel. But he also, since he's talking about the camel, and since there is a story in the Quran that's referenced as a she-camel, it would seem to imply that there was actually a much bigger coherent narrative about that has since been lost, but the other chapters in the Quran did mention, because the Quran does that a lot. For example, you have Surah Al-Nur, which is like the story of Noah, but you also have Noah mentioned in other chapters. So that is quite common. So it seems as if at some point there may have been another chapter of the Quran. It just wasn't canonized. Yeah.
No wonder
Well, I
Mo
guess
was
it
so
never
into
made the
these
canon.
camels. We know what they recommend about camels. Let me pause you a moment, guys. Chris's link is in the description. I think by accident I have an empty description box. It's very possible today. That's the one time in 4 years I've done that. But he's in the title. His channel is linked. Click the channel link. It'll take you to his channel. Please sign up, subscribe. And of course, for the 116 of you that are watching right now, if you guys could all hit the like button at least 3 times, which means because that so give it a like if you do like my
Don't
work.
do it twice,
Please subscribe. Right, I'm getting these days 3-4 times the views that I did even 4 months ago, but I'm getting a quarter of the subscriptions, and I have no idea why. So if you guys like what I do, please subscribe. Please tell your friends, but do subscribe just as a reminder. I have to do all these YouTube things. Remember to floss, brush your teeth at least twice a day. You know, these are important things. And by the same token, hit the like button, also subscribe, and go give Chris a watch. And yeah, I mean, so Chris, I mean, look, I understand the Muslims are not even listening. The Muslims are just pushing a narrative. They don't care about facts. But do you think that these facts have an impact? Do you think that if we can get these out and if people bring them up in private conversations on social media, make little videos, make memes, will this make a difference?
Yes, I think it will. So it's the reason why I think this is particularly powerful is because it shows that Muslims have been lied to. The Muslims were told a narrative, usually from birth, that there is only one Quran and it's perfectly preserved. Oh, wait, there's actually 7. Okay, then it changed to 10. Then for a while it was 14, but those other 4 readings aren't really in use because I kind of lost. Okay, so the Quran isn't just one, and it's not perfectly preserved. The oral tradition we know was not perfectly preserved. We know
there is nothing in Islamic
fact.
history, nothing in scholarship that claims that it's perfectly preserved.
Yeah, and even that, like early scholars didn't make these kind of claims. It's later scholars who took advantage, probably of the fact that the 1924 Cairo version of the Quran gained such wide popularity that most Muslims just thought, oh, there's only one Quran because we all just have one Quran. And it's like,
Cairo
no,
edition.
You guys were sold a particular kind of Quran and you all bought it. And for that reason, you don't think there is any others. It's a bit like if 99% of the world like had a King James Version Bible and didn't have any other like translation. I mean, there's the difference here in terms of translations and actual different Arabic Qurans, but that's kind of the only way you'd see it. Like,
no, look, it's obvious. The king is on it, so therefore we know the king is in it. That's why it's called. You know, I mean, hey, Jesus gave one to each of the apostles. Said, hey, read my book, make copies, spread it around the world. I mean, we all know that that's a true story.
Funny stuff. But yeah, just to go back to the original point that sure. It does change, and it does affect Muslims. So I'm in the middle of responding to Hamza and Hamza's dad, John Fontaine, because they responded to my live stream with God Logic, where we went through a lot of this stuff about the Quran, although not in the same kind of depth that we've gone into here, but just sort of basic level. And they're struggling to kind of give reasons as to why the Quran is preserved. So it does make a difference. And the reason they cover it is because Muslims ask them. If Muslims weren't asking, hey, I heard, can you please explain it? They wouldn't do live streams about this stuff. They do it because we're effective and because Muslims do have questions. And if you're a Muslim listening, you should really ponder, why is it that you've been lied to? Why is that the case? Like, you shouldn't let people lie to you like that. You should know the truth of your own religion.
Yeah, let me bring up sort of the last couple of points. We should wind down, perhaps. But I mean, this is fascinating stuff. So this is the non-canonical readings. Look, I'm going to be doing multiple episodes. I'm going to be taking my short videos on the Birmingham folio. I'll be expanding that. I'm going to be doing the Yemeni one as well to really take that apart and destroy every possible defense that they can bring. And I'll be going into things like Surah Al-Fatiha, and I'm going to be working on other Quranic material, going through much of the latest scholarship so that the audience will be able to use this material. And I'll share it with you, Chris, happily. You know, if we can discuss these live, I mean, that would be great because you have a great deal of knowledge. But this is non-canonical readings of the Quran, recognition and authenticity. The Himzi reading. Who's heard of Himzi? I haven't. Have you?
No.
But Intisar A. Rab at Princeton. So clearly he's from Princeton, I guess. Okay, introduction. The existence of an old Qur'an manuscript that does not conform to any canonical reading will raise questions about the history of the Qur'an and canonization. What describes the landscape of Quranical readings, Qira'at, before canonization, said to have been initiated by Ibn Mujahid 3 centuries after the advent of Islam? 300 years later. Isn't that a little late? Just a fraction? And he says, by what criteria did some readings fall inside the canon and some outside? Why did non-canonical readings persist? The British Library's quote-unquote oldest Quran manuscript is a non-conforming copy of the Quran that can inform inquiries into Quranic canon because it originates supposedly early, so the 8th century, right? And it provides a look at variant readings circulating before canonization. Hold on. So in other words, we don't have 1st century canonization. It's now stating we have 2nd century canonization. And it belongs not to the canonical Damascus tradition. Hold on. Damascus is where, Chris?
Vastly further up north. It is not in
It's
the
in
Hijaz.
Syria. It's not even in Medina. It's not even in Mecca. It's not even Arabic. It's not even Arab. And it says here it belongs not to the canonical Damascus tradition, which is which caliphate? That's the Umayyad Caliphate, right? But to that of Hims, about 100 miles north, with later Damascus additions.
That's interesting. Wait, so which manuscript is he talking about here? Is he talking about the British Library?
Birmingham.
So this is the Birmingham portfolio. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard this before. That is interesting.
Yeah, I know. I've been trying to find some of the latest scholarship that doesn't get mentioned. So I'm working through stuff that Shadi Nasser quotes and that. Look, I don't trust Moraine van Putten as far as I can throw a piano. Okay.
He does a lot of good things.
Yes, he does.
There are lots of things. So I take the good, and I'm grateful.
And there are things I would question about the guy. Let's just say there are things I would question. I like Shadi Nasser. I like a lot of these guys, but they also fail to ask certain critical questions. Maybe because, like certain well-known authors, they don't want to get stabbed in the eye in public. I can fully understand that. And Moraine van Putten probably doesn't want to lose his $2 million scholarship. I can relate to that, I guess. So there might be a financial reason or a health reason attached to this. But yeah, your thoughts on this? I mean, this adds another wrinkle to the story.
It does, yeah. That would be quite substantial. I would love to read more about this because.
So I gave you the slides, but you only read the first 6 pages, as you told me.
I know.
So now this is homework, okay? So yeah,
nice one.
So
and I can totally cheat and figure out what slide number that was. 42?
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah. So it says here. The copying process resulted in a hybrid reading that arguably is notable for the extent to which its hybridity went unnoticed or unchallenged. So the fact that it was a deviant Quran didn't matter at the time because it was normal for these complete fictional variations to exist. No one batted an eyelid. So scribes worked on this Quran in more than one location across time, and it shows that this was a long-term endeavor. It wasn't something that got written down. It was compiled and edited over decades, centuries.
That's very interesting. Yeah, especially this is the Birmingham Quran. That is really interesting. I say Quran, Birmingham portfolio. Yeah.
So understand. So this is just one part of a whole, shall we say, this is a whole avenue of attack that I'm creating here. Bringing up the facts and showing, look, all of this ties together. This Yemeni Quran and the Birmingham one and all of this. And there's a lot more information about these than the standard narrative. And so the thing is, I'm trying to go beyond the standard story that Jay Smith tells, for instance. I mean, he cracked open this dam. I mean, he opened the door to this. He kicked in the door. But there's more to the story. And even the mainstream scholars that tend to, shall we say, stay within safe guidelines, even they drop little hints and clues and I followed those breadcrumbs and I'm coming up with things like this. And this starts to this drives a massive wedge into the Quranic story.
Yeah, so I totally agree, man. something just came in my head. So Marine Van Putten did a really awesome thing. He said that, and he said that I was quite surprised he did say this. He said that he doesn't think any of the canonical readings are Tuwata. And what that means is because Muslims believe the Quran has every verse has at least two people who recited it. So that way they can basically say that means it's Tuwata because it has two people. It's interesting they do that, but this means that that's not the case. So, in effect, because the Qira'at are the Quran, and because the Qira'at are not Mutawata, that means the Quran is not Mutawata, at least not in entirety, which is, substantial.
Yeah. So I wonder. So it says here, he says, it raised no eyebrows because it did not offend the gatekeepers of the canon. Because it might reflect a deliberate hybrid, I'm making my Quran. Because that's what you do. So the idea of an unchanged single form of the Quran is a new invention. It's a late invention. Jihad, it means peace, struggle. That's a 1990s invention.
There are scientific miracles in the Quran.
Yeah, these are all the last 20 years since 9/11 where these lies have come up. So yeah, I don't know. That's maybe it's almost 2 hours. I should call it a night. It's almost 10, and I haven't had dinner yet. I didn't have lunch. So it's one of those days. As I told you, I'm busy with a lot of things right now. So
yeah.
So yeah.
Let's call it a day. I think that was really good. Hopefully, people can take this kind of information and use it in their own discussions with Muslims. Show them how the Quran is not perfectly preserved. I think that's.
I mean, you have my material. I'll be updating the slides as I go because the later slides, the last slide, I need to go back and update and edit and shuffle around. And my slides tend to be works of progress until I finish them all. So yeah, but if you can share some of the stuff with the other guys in the apologetics community and get them to investigate, because there's more detail that can come from this. I'll be putting out a lot of stuff on the Birmingham, on the Yemeni Quran. I'll be putting out a lot of stuff on the Sunnah. It's just easier to say Yemeni than to say Sunnah.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's noticed, but I actually have a slight stutter. I've had a tiny speech impediment since I was a kid. Since I was a kid. So what's that?
It's not noticeable, or at least I haven't noticed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I have a slight S and R impediment. It's just that some of these words I really, it's like I got to think carefully before I say them. So yeah, Artsy Fartsy, thank you very much, and thank you guys. And for those who donated, I'm really grateful. Thank you. I really am grateful for that. And please subscribe. As I said, I'm getting 3-4 times the views, but I'm getting 1/4 of the subscriptions I had 8 months ago. So I'm getting, this last 4 months, my channel has exploded in viewership, but declined heavily in subscriptions. I'm not sure why. So, but yeah, please follow Chris as well. He does some very powerful work at Speaker's Corner. And I will be in touch with Francis. We'll chat, Francis. If not tonight, then tomorrow morning. Just reach out to me on Skype. We'll chat. And then also I'm going to be bringing on Connie Francis. I think that's her name. And Eric. What? Let me find the name. I got to find this. Eric. Oh, they've got their own channel. I promised to bring them on. Eric. Oh, no. Come on. Where did I put it? Oh, she was. Okay, can't find it, but I've good grief. So anyway, Eric and Connie, you must know them. They've got a little channel as well. I'll be bringing them on. I've booked them. I've told them to be on for the 2nd of June. It's been really difficult to schedule. So it's been really difficult to, so I've just told them, no, not Ibarra. No, not the Catholic. I don't know. I've watched Eric Ibarra and some things he's great and other things I'm like, okay. Anyway, so, but yeah, they've got a small channel and they always have, let me get you the name. I'll tell you right now, please. No, where is Connie? Here we go. Eric Smith. Okay, whatever. Okay, Cross and Crescent. Yes, thank you. Villainous, you always save my bacon. You always seem to have the right answer. Cross and Crescent. So I'll be bringing on Connie and Eric from Cross and Crescent. I've planned them for the 2nd. That's Sunday, the 2nd of June. So that'll be great to have them on. and to talk about their work, their channel, their interest, and to discuss some various topics. So I've got that going. Thunderous, hey man, we need to make something happen as well. It's also very difficult. This guy who brings the thunder is very difficult to schedule with. But then again, it's always difficult to schedule anything. Even I have timing issues. So yeah, Thunderous, we need to do something. I'd like you and Francis to come on. You both have a similar background. So anyway, last words from you, Chris.
Yeah, I think we did well. You did a quite good summary there. I'm glad that we got to do the stream, we got to present this information. I think your work is amazing, Lloyd. Like really, even long before we even met and chatted for the first time, I was looking at your work and found it incredibly useful. Just in my study, you're a great channel to study from. And it's amazing to have this opportunity. So thank you for having me. And again, I hope this is useful to everyone who watched.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. So look, we'll be in touch. I'm sure Chris and I will be back on the next couple of weeks. I am extremely busy. I will schedule things, but my time is very limited. I've got a lot to do. Thunderous, so are you, but thank you. Thunderous is a very smart guy. I learned a great deal. Thunderous inspired me. I learned a great deal from him. He's the one who inspired me on my atheism series. So you need to thank him for his knowledge, for his work, his research, his insights. And the man's he's a fantastic guy. I've met him. I was very privileged. He's an awesome dude. Good looking man too. Very good looking dude. So stylish, sophisticated, awesome guy. So yeah, Chris, thank you. Thank you for knowledge, for your time. This has been fantastic. And audience, God bless. Take care. And we'll see you all soon. All right.
God bless everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye.